Guys, thank you so much for watching the podcast. YouTube is 70% of my income. Spotify's 25 and Rumble is 5. Over the past 6 months, it has shifted to now where those three combined were 100%. They are now only about 60% combined because so many of you guys have joined the Patreon, the locals, the Cash App, the PayPal, the Buy Me a Coffee, Sport Drink, Heaven's Harvest, all this stuff. A lot of you guys send me messages and say I can only do $1 a month. Dude, that makes such a world of a difference. If you can do $1 a month, you are in my pirate army and you are helping this show go to the point where we want to be completely independent of those platforms so we can just be even crazier. So if you're throwing $5 a month to me, you may not think it's much, dude. You are absolutely like you're in my army, and I genuinely mean that from my heart. Thank you. Like that's what allows me to be, you know, vulgar and unproduced and slandering people and calling for violence and all sorts of things that I don't to quote Tim Dillon, I don't think I'm like a priority on the FBI. But I bet I'm on a cork board somewhere in Jersey going, let's watch this guy. So if you can, please donate to those. If you can't do any of that, go to ARC. That's in the description. ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children, led by Basil Baz, a former CIA paramilitary, and a bunch of special forces guys, all retired. Started in 1993. They have saved one child a month, 12 months a year for 33 years in a row, 100% success rate. They always get the kids back to their parents. And I always emphasize this. This isn't some online course where you can learn about, they give that too. You can learn about human trafficking. These are guys that I've seen the pictures of them before they go on. I can't share them because of OPSEC, but it's like SEAL Team 6. They're decked. They are going in and physically rescuing kids. It's not, it's not this like we have flyers out. They go get the kid and bring the kid home. It's really the most pure thing I've ever interacted with in my life. Donations are tax deductible. The link is in the description. You go read all about it. You can see success stories. You can see my multitude of interviews with Baz. Um, if you can't donate to my show, if you've got $1 and you can only give to one thing, give it to ARC. I'm fine. I'm a 35. I'll figure the podcast out, or I won't. Whatever. This is I meant to make this like a 1 minute beginning, but I'm meandering. Uh, if you can only donate to one thing, donate to ARC because that is objectively good. And if you can donate to both, that's cool too. If you can only do one, donate to ARC. And yeah, it's like you're literally help save children. So that being said, oh, and I always forget, Atom. It's a cryptocurrency. That link is in the description. All you guys need to do for that is click on the Telegram link. They just want eyeballs in the Telegram link. I don't know why. I don't understand this. One of them is going to come on the show and explain it, but they're sponsoring the show and helping me with revenue. Go click on the Telegram link. That's all I need you guys to do. I don't know why. That's what I have to do. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Guys, thank you so much for watching the podcast. YouTube is 70% of my income. Spotify's 25 and Rumble is 5. Over the past 6 months, it has shifted to now where those three combined were 100%. They are now only about 60% combined because so many of you guys have joined the Patreon, the locals, the Cash App, the PayPal, the Buy Me a Coffee, Sport Drink, Heaven's Harvest, all this stuff. A lot of you guys send me messages and say I can only do $1 a month. Dude, that makes such a world of a difference. If you can do $1 a month, you are in my pirate army and you are helping this show go to the point where we want to be completely independent of those platforms so we can just be even crazier. So if you're throwing $5 a month to me, you may not think it's much, dude. You are absolutely like you're in my army, and I genuinely mean that from my heart. Thank you. Like that's what allows me to be, vulgar and unproduced and, slandering people and calling for violence and, all sorts of things I don't, to quote Tim Dillon, I don't think I'm like a priority on the FBI, but I bet I'm on a cork board somewhere in Jersey going, let's watch this guy. So if you can, please donate to those. If you can't do any of that, go to ARC. That's in the description. ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children, led by Basil Baz, a former CIA paramilitary, and a bunch of special forces guys, all retired. Started in 1993. They have saved one child a month, 12 months a year for 33 years in a row, 100% success rate. They always get the kids back to their parents. And I always emphasize this. This isn't some online course where you can learn about, they give that too. You can learn about human trafficking. These are guys that I've seen the pictures of them before they go on. I can't share them because of OPSEC, but it's like SEAL Team 6. They're decked. They are going in and physically rescuing kids. It's not, it's not this like, we have flyers out. They go get the kid and bring the kid home. It's really the most pure thing I've ever interacted with in my life. Donations are tax deductible. The link is in the description. You go read all about it. You can see success stories. You can see my multitude of interviews with Baz. Um, if you can't donate to my show, if you've got $1 and you can only give to one thing, give it to ARC. I'm fine. I'm a 35. I'll figure the podcast out, or I won't. Whatever. This is I meant to make this like a 1 minute beginning, but I'm meandering. Uh, if you can only donate to one thing, donate to ARC because that is objectively good. And if you can donate to both, that's cool too. If you can only do one, donate to ARC. And yeah, it's like you're literally help save children. So that being said, oh, and I always forget, Atom. It's a cryptocurrency. That link is in the description. All you guys need to do for that is click on the Telegram link. They just want eyeballs in the Telegram link. I don't know why. I don't understand this. One of them's going to come on the show and explain it, but they're sponsoring the show and helping me with revenue. Go click on the Telegram link. That's all I need you guys to do. I don't know why. That's what I have to do. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Look, We are recording on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026 at 2:12 p.m. Eastern time with seven-star General Dave Collum. He is the shadow president of the United States. A lot of people don't know that, but he's the one blowing the strings. He is QAnon. His methods are beyond your understanding. So just sit back and
An
listen.
alien creature who was beamed here 25,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's so beyond even like the Illuminati and hoods. It's legitimately, yeah, the guy, the sperm theory of sending life to different planets. It's so above all you guys. So just shut the fuck up. But yeah, no, I want to I want to because you and I have always kind of shot back and forth in little blips about like the craziest projects during the Cold War. Not the ones that are still admittedly crazy, like the SR-71 Blackbird, the U-2 spy plane, the Corona satellites, like all mind blowing that happened back in the 60s. But there's always even deeper projects that are they melt your head. And I think the one we talked about last time was the Shiva Star. It was a capacitor bank that shot physical plasma balls at 10% the speed of light. And it was going to be a cannon that we would just put around the United States, and these would just shoot shit at 10% the speed of light. And another one, and I'll shut up in a minute, and another one was the idea of having these giant, in the 50s, these giant lasers to defend cities. And it was going to be trialed around the Great Lakes. And the idea was to build caverns under the Great Lakes equal in volume to the Great. This is DARPA. This was an actual DARPA thing. An equal volume to the Great Lakes. They figured it would take 30 minutes for Soviet ICBM to get there. So they needed to create, I guess, sluice gates big enough to drain the Great Lakes in 15 minutes down to here. And that would power generators because their lasers were so inefficient back then that it would take 15 minutes to charge up the capacitors. And then they would ostensibly just shoot ray guns into the air. And a third one is they were genuinely planning on this idea of on both sides of the United States at like an altitude of 50 miles to detonate like a 1 or 2 kiloton nuclear bomb every 2 minutes forever. because it would create this like ionosphere over the United States that would mess up the targeting of the missiles coming in. And it's just when I look at stuff like that, all stuff that was not crazy guy shit, stuff that was classified, it just seems like the flashy stuff you see, though impressive, it always seems like there's a deeper program that is just beyond anything you can imagine. So I'll shut up if you want to take it from there.
Well, I had a similar experience, although I can't say I found that stuff, but I dug into DEWs after the Lahaina fires because of claims that they were started by the DEWs, directed energy weapons. And there were videos claiming that you could see the beam and stuff like that, but I don't think you could because I don't think the beams that have high energy are in any way visible to the naked eye. I think they're now you could get a case where the beam causes a disturbance in the air, ionizing molecules, and that could be the color. So I could be wrong on that. But I was less interested in that, and more interested in, for example, I think the Quebec fires were started by DEWs. So, and the characteristic that convinced me of that was satellite photos
I remember
showing
that.
duck fire starting, and they all started simultaneously, and there's about 26 of them, if I remember the number,
I'm sorry, and for everybody listening, miles and miles apart. They just
350-mile diameter.
they just all start at the same
Right.
time.
So it wasn't a downwind spark effect or anything like that. And they all started simultaneously. 350-mile sort of buckshot diameter. I took the satellite images and I found a map of Quebec and sized it up and said, okay, this is how big the buckshot of the fires was. And it's in a region where there's no communication or anything. And so, and so, and so it wasn't arsons, it wasn't people with cell phones, it wasn't, at least the kind we get to have. Um, and so I decided that it probably was the best evidence that I had found that we tested them. Hey, Alfie, get over here. Alfie, Charlie, come here.
Alfie,
Um,
come talk about Rand.
And so I was reading RAND reports from 40 years ago and Department of Defense reports from 40 years ago that were declassified and 40 years old. And the shit they were doing then was stunningly good. Like they had different frequencies have different dispersions. So like microwaves cover a broad and some UV laser would be very sharp. And to get through the atmosphere, they would use one laser to poke a hole in the atmosphere and some femtosecond later, a second laser would shoot the actual kill shot through the hole in the atmosphere
Yeah.
uh, and hit the target. And these were extraordinary things. And also just the general discussion in these reports um, was so matter-of-factly sort of, yes, we can do this and this and this. I'm going, Jesus Christ, I did not know that.
It sounds like they've had this conversation 1,000 times. It's not like
Yeah, it was
oh
like,
my God, we're doing this. They're like, okay, so given we do, yeah.
oh my God, we're doing this part is behind the paywall.
Eh,
And now if you move 40 years later and go behind the paywall, what do they have? I don't know. But I think I finished by saying, this doesn't sound realistic. And I said, well, I think it was April 6, 1945, when complete science fiction turned into reality in a microsecond, right?
July 16th, July 16th,
Or was it 16th?
July 16th. It's just the other
And,
day.
and then there was the one, I think it was us or the Soviets who tested a one of the real big bombs up in the atmosphere. And we
I think
did
that
a
was us.
character like fry job on a bunch of stuff that we did
Star
not know would happen.
Starfish Prime over Hawaii, about
That's
200 miles over Hawaii. That
right.
was
We
us.
tried a bunch of stuff, and that's when we realized, holy shit, these things are good for other other things too.
Yeah. At the
And
time they were building Cheyenne Mountain, and when they did that test and they realized it cooked all the street lights and everything, they were like,
that's right.
fuck. So what they did is they went into Cheyenne Mountain, which was already a crazy wonder of the world, and they constructed a copper shell, I mean 500 feet across, then deconstructed it, brought it in on trucks, and then reconstructed it inside Cheyenne Mountain, so it has a Faraday shell around it.
Right. So it's a Faraday cage to keep them from getting fried.
Yeah. And it's
And I, by the way, think civilian use of a Faraday cage would be really useful is if in bathrooms that have a single stall that you put a Faraday cage in there so some guy can't sit there taking a dump doing emails,
I like that.
right? Because I
Speed
don't
it
want to,
up.
with a turtle sticking its head out of the shell, waiting for some guy to get off the toilet where I go, dude, you're looking at your phone now. You're
If you do
not
that in
doing
airports, yeah,
anywhere. Well,
there's no
usually
time. Yeah,
multiple bathrooms, but yeah, I think it would be great if you could not get phone reception inside a stall of a bathroom. Um, and and so in any case, so I think those weapons are out there. I remember talking to a taxi cab driver who was going into the Air Force. This is probably 40 years ago, and he was talking about how, if you go unconscious, your plane will fly you home. And I remember thinking, wow. And then I thought about it and I go, makes sense, right? Makes total sense. In fact, it's a trivial thing now, right?
sure.
Fucking drones, you can buy a drone off Amazon that returns home.
Why
So
would they not implement that in a $400 million jet?
so not to distract us too far too fast here, but there's one of the theories of this guy, Baron Coleman, who I do not know what to make of him, who's been chasing the Charlie Kirk story, who miraculously showed up on Twitter the same month that Charlie was killed, which makes me scratch my head and go, who is he? But he's telling, in my opinion, the correct story, so I'm glad to see he arrived. But he talks about this saying, there is no reason to believe that you can necessarily understand, even fathom what it is that actually popped him in the neck. And when we were on last time, or was it on Ferris? I don't know. I pointed to the hole in his neck, and I swear to God, when I watched it, it was on this side, but I would never would have put it on that side. It was on this side. In any event, I think the whole exploding microphone could be a total distraction. I think probably Candace is getting thrown unbelievable curveballs to make sure that she has a bunch of shit that you can show as stupid. I think they're carpet bombing her with bullshit.
They probably use some DARPA fucking thing that,
You can imagine some laser sighted thing where some
well,
guy, 10 miles away
yeah, just
sighted
it.
it on his neck. The other interesting thing, I already took us off this. Um,
No, I don't care. Keep going.
what I've been noticing lately, she showed some more photos of the car they took him in and stuff. They talk about doing CPR and crap like that. And she's very good at showing the TPOSA guys lying. She doesn't just say they lie, she shows it. She shows, the term, where the term that she has the receipts, do you know where that came from? You know how that became very popular? That was a phrase Whitney Houston used it supposedly.
Oh,
I looked that up because it bothered me that it appeared out of nowhere. In any event, the inside of the van, the picture showing it, there's no blood. There's very little blood. There's little tiny bits. And I happen to see the aftermath of a guy who took it in the carotid artery and survived. And I got off the elevators, and it was at the elevators, which means the explosion in the lab had occurred. He had gotten his throat nailed. The ambulance had shown up. They got him on a stretcher. They got him to the elevator, and it looked like St. Valentine's Day Massacre at the
yeah,
elevators.
yeah.
And I'm going, there's no chance you could shove a guy with a neck shot into a car without there
With
just being
no,
everywhere, just everywhere. And of
yeah,
course, they
yeah,
scrubbed the car, sold it, and got rid of it.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's a dark joke, but it's like when soldiers talk about somebody's leg getting blown off, and you see the blood just shooting 30 or 40 feet. Like,
Right.
that's why it's called blood pressure. You never
Right.
really think about that, but it's you cut your neck, you will paint the wall 15 feet away.
I know. And that's exactly right. And
That's a good point.
question I have is why am I seeing so many prominent people spitting out the party line that it was Tyler Robinson without I can imagine people saying, look, I don't buy this part of the story or that part. It doesn't add up. I don't think there's any chance that you could take an unbiased look at what happened and not have all sorts of unanswered questions.
It is, if I may,
Unimaginable.
if I may speak with wisdom and authority that I don't have, just doing this podcast and just kind of seeing things over the years and the way I cover things and the topics I cover, there is it's so much to me it's so much worse than like their assets for the like, intelligence agencies. They really are just m lacking morals, lacking backbones, lacking respect for themselves.
They're working for somebody.
Let's really break. Let's go. I'll play devil's advocate. Occam's razor. They're working for money. You know, when I got kicked, I got back on YouTube in October. They invited me back on. YouTube is now 70% of my income. It pays my rent. For
Right.
5 years, I was kicked off for talking about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and whatever. And in that time, other people were getting kicked off for talking. Well, my original warnings were from the. I got a whole smorgasbord. I get my original warnings for the 2020 election, and then there's a whole thing where I had on some Delta Force guys that were like maybe talking about hanging politicians from streetlights, and that got me an FBI visit, and then the COVID stuff, and then I was booted for 5 years. My point is if you looked at me and you're just a guy in a the dream is you got a computer and you just got to start streaming. If you looked at me and you wouldn't even be wrong, you would say, okay, he has integrity, but he's been fucked the whole time. And like, it's kind of working now. And then you look at people that are just, and I don't know him, I've never met him. So all the disclaimers, but you look at some like Tim Pool, or there's another guy
Tim Pool's so corrupt at this point.
well, it's to the point where I don't even care if it is corruption, but it is not, it's just staying in the middle because he's reached this point where he's making a ton of fucking money. Like I really
Well,
do think
not
Occam's
that someone got into his head and said, "You are not to talk about this." It is not just him trying to thread the needle.
I
He's
think
not
I
just
think
threading.
they both happened. I think because I have a friend that knew him 20 years ago. I think he got to a point where he wanted money. She knew he wanted money.
We all do.
And then he reached a point where now I agree with you. He hit a critical mass and then somebody was like, "Hey, not that. You do this."
But their hostility, they're not even hemming and hawing and trying to dial it back. The hostility.
Yeah.
I don't want to name them yet because I'm not positive, but a guy I've had interactions with through the years who I think was a really interesting guy and seemed to buck the system. And I'll give a hint to the audience. I think he invented woke right. Don't say his name, but I think he invented woke right, the term.
I have no idea what his name is.
Yeah, some listeners will know who it is, I think, if I'm correct. And and I talked about the Charlie Kirk thing on a podcast. The guy said, "Oh," and as well, one of the podcasters I really like. He said, "Oh, I had so and so on. You ought to watch it." And he was so party line. I was on the stage with Charlie Kirk probably 40 times, and I guarantee you that this is totally straightforward and, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there going, so what were you doing on the stage with Charlie Kirk 40 times? And then I started digging around, and it's clear that he's on Israel's payroll. He's on
Mm.
Israel's payroll, and I had no idea. So then I don't know whose podcast it was. I mentioned that Megan Kelly followed me, which is in the world of Twitter bingo. That's bingo,
That's an
right?
odd one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an odd one.
It's cool. You're like, oh, a big fall. It's also
Well, I
little.
guess, you got to kind of take some pride in that when someone big comes along.
Sorry, through my interviews with the military guys, every once in a while I'll get a follow from like a legendary Delta Force guy, and I'm like, that's cool. And then but then part of me is also like, and terrifying.
Right.
Like,
So then I'm sitting there thinking I hit the jackpot on Twitter that day. And then I mentioned that she did a podcast where she's talking about Charlie Kirk, and it was complete. The buzzword you watch for is overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson's guilty. When they say overwhelming evidence, it means they got a formal memo. They're not just saying that. It's a memo. It's one of those, where they show these compilations of newscasters all saying exactly the same thing. That memo went out. Overwhelming evidence. It's being used by everyone to support the
safe and
narrative.
effective.
Overwhelming, yeah, safe and effective. That's exactly a threat to our democracy, right? There's certain
Slava
catchphrases.
Ukraini.
That's right. And I'm going, what happened to Megan? She was like counterattacking Israel at one point. Stuff. She was growing a real pair of ovaries there. What happened?
Growing a pair of
And so
ovaries.
I get in, I expressed this man. I said, so now I can't even trust Megan, who I thought I couldn't. I really like her because A, she's a complete MILF, and B, she's a trash talker. I love her potty mouth, right? And C, I thought she was one of the good guys. I thought she was kind of trying to get to the truth in some ways. And then I got an email from someone who shall remain nameless, who I checked as well as I could, and I'm convinced she's legit, who was one of the founding executives that founded Fox News. She hired Megan, and she said, don't trust her.
That's when you showed me.
Yeah. I'll tell you off screen what the name was, but I
No, no,
went,
no, no. But that alone is enough. Don't
oh
trust
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah. And she said she knows how to manage up. There's two things that made me not trust Megan in the past, besides the fact she was just generic Fox News. One was, remember the first debate with Trump, and Megan asked one of the first questions, and she said, what would it take to get you to drop out of the race? And Trump fired back with, a sort of a slash and burn counterattack. And it became the big Megan versus Donald Trump battle. That looked like Trump teed that one up. That looked like a perfect, okay, let's start a fight. You get famous, I get press. Let's do it. Megan said, sure. So I said, okay, that makes total sense. There's no way she would have asked him that stupid question. What a dumb question, right? The second one was Pizzagate boy, James Alefantis, who I believe, put it this way, I wouldn't want to have to testify in support of him in court.
Hmm.
And and she did a complete puff piece to try to shut down the Pizzagate story. And it bothered me. It was not just interviewing him and saying, tell me about it. It was clearly a puff piece. Sort of like when Ellen DeGeneres interviewed the guard at the Vegas shootings. And the whole thing was to shut the whole thing down. And you can see these puff pieces. Now, Fantas, if there's a guy who needs a lot of puff pieces, that's one of those boys who does, because the evidence against him is very good. And and so there were reasons, but I thought, well, maybe Fox told her to do it, right? She's on payroll, you get told what to do, et cetera, et cetera. But at this point, you get to this, well, so who's putting out the memo? And so now if you're on Twitter, the other day, Robbie Starbuck went out and attacked the non-Tyler Robinson crowd, right? The Candace Owens, the Ian Carroll's, Ian Carroll's probably a very complicated guy, right? I don't think he's just a pizza delivery guy, right? He's way too smart, which I have no trouble with that. One of the smartest guys I ever met was a third grade bean picker. It was an unbelievable experience. I picked him up hitchhiking, and he knew everything. He knew everything. And I said, how'd you learn this? He said, oh, I read a lot. He hadn't been fully employed for 12 years. I mean, a guy who fell off society. So I don't equate education with intellect. I do equate intellect with humor.
Hmm.
The comedians are smart. Um, and um, and so Robbie Starbuck's out there, and he's done good work on attacking, the woke left and stuff like that, which I liked. But then again, you say, but is there a reason? Um, and he went out there and attacked Candace, and I watched it and it was an hour presentation. I watched it because I said, okay, I've got to hear the counterattack, and this guy can probably do it. And I thought it was terrible. I thought he used all these really transparent tricks to attack her, and showed clips of her acting goofy, just to make her look goofy. And what I can tell you is, if you are a person who thinks Candace is nuts, what I can tell you is you've probably watched clips of her. If you watch our shows, there's nothing nuts about that chick. When she says, this guy lied, she shows what he said on a clip, and then she says, and here's the next clip, and here's him saying the opposite, right? She absolutely brings the receipts, as we were talking about a few minutes ago. She doesn't just accuse people of lying. She brings the data, she brings the clips, she pieces it together, and what she does is she's trying to solve a crime publicly in real time. So if you were Seymour Hersh, instead of spending 6 months doing investigative reporting, writing a thermonuclear bomb of a paper, if every day Seymour told us what he had learned that day, the bad guys would start defending, they'd start evading, they'd start, right? And so Candace is doing this in a way that's it's most difficult to catch them. Although I think she's basically prompting them to make mistakes. So I think she's baiting them into making mistakes. And uh, and so I have not seen her lie. I've seen her make what I think are mistakes. For example, I don't think the microphone in Charlie's shirt shot him in the neck. I don't think that story makes sense. There's something wrong with that story. And the reason is because it's not positioned correctly for the wound. The microphone, the wound's over here. Um, that's the problem. On the screen, it looks like I'm pointing at the wrong side of my of that's interesting. It reverses it. Yeah. So that's why. So for me, this is where Charlie got shot.
I feel like the exploding microphone, there are so many cameras on him. I feel like an explosion, people would be looking at it with thermal overlays. I think they would see.
Right. Well, so there is something very funny about the microphone and stuff like that. But that's where I think Baron Coleman's idea saying, look, just because you don't understand how it works doesn't mean it's not real. It gets back to the tech question.
Well,
You got to figure, let's say the Israelis put them down, you got to figure they got ways to put people down that we can't fathom.
okay, so there's, let me try to find it. Fuck, I'm not gonna find it. Um, yeah, just because you don't know it exists doesn't mean it's not real. And I always point to Cold War proxies, so Korea, Vietnam, whatever, pick your poison. And you have it often it's like, poor farmers or Afghans or whatever the fuck. And they're not dumb enough that they don't know what's going on. They get that this new force is coming in and but they play ball because they're going. They might make $1 a day, and I've interviewed the guys like the Delta
They're as
Force guy.
smart as we are. That's the key. They are as smart as we are.
Correct. Okay. Okay. So sorry, the thunder and lightning. So like they know what's going on, and they just look at it as like, hey, I make $1 a day, and these guys are giving me $100 a day to occasionally shoot an RPG. Yeah, I'll do this. They don't understand the RPG. Maybe they do. They certainly don't understand the drone. They absolutely don't understand the satellite. They don't. And I know that because the guys I've talked to have like they would be working with Afghanis and they would point up at the moon and they'd be like, "Yeah, we landed on the moon." They'd be like, "How can you land on the moon? It's this big." Like it's 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 not that their IQ's gone, it's just that they don't have the education system we have.
It's
Point
not in life experience.
so point being though is just take that as an abstraction. What is that? It's a much more technologically advanced power using things to make a smaller, less advanced group attack someone else. And
Right.
that other side is being funded by a very strong technological power. Just because you don't know that there's it's 1963, just because you can't fathom that there's a titanium plane going Mach 4 at the edge of space doesn't make it not real.
Right.
And that's how I try to look at this stuff is when we go,
Probably in the neck.
yeah, so there's a perfect another example though. It doesn't have to be aircraft. You can look at something and go, well, it doesn't fit any of our models. And it's like, well, yeah, well, if there's a classified technology being used, that's not in your model.
Right.
And that's how I look at it is just because
And
you don't know it exists doesn't negate it.
some point when your model doesn't fit, it means you need a newer model, right? That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's another rule of thumb though, is just because your model doesn't explain everything doesn't mean you should throw it away yet either.
Yeah.
We run into something, the area of chemistry that I say was very, very complicated to the point that we almost had no competitors, I think. I think because the competitors look at I ain't doing that shit. And and um and and what we learned was is that, at some point you get to the point where it's self-consistent. It makes sense. But there's oftentimes a period where you go, there were papers that we ended up publishing and it made sense. But partway through, I'm going, fuck it. I'll forfeit the paper. Give me the fucking answer key. I want to know what the fuck we're looking at here, right? And you just have to persist. So that's what Candace is doing. yesterday I watched a video thinking it was going to be boring as shit because the hearings are over. So what's she going to talk about? But she showed some interesting stuff. And I'm trying to remember what the most interesting thing was. She loves to show the TPSA guys lying, which is a pretty easy thing to catch. Um, I'm trying to remember what there was something that really caught me by surprise. Well, in any event, I'll skip that. But every day she delivers something, and you got to muscle through an hour. That's the problem. She fills an hour with enough information, and the first 5 minutes she's going to be blathering about something that you don't care about. So you
It's
figure,
it's it's the people that hate Rogan and the guy you go just listen. Like I started listening to him in 2011. I'm a hipster faggot. I listened first. Listen to 20 minutes of him. Yeah, this is just a dude. He's just a guy.
right.
Now I don't know. He's so big. Who knows what's happening? But I would imagine it's the same with Candace, where it's like, listen, just take 20 minutes and you're like, oh, this is just a person.
So I curiously watched Julian Dory interview Joe Kent, and I thought it was by far the best Joe Kent interview I've ever seen.
Fuck you.
I'm sorry, but ours was not it, dude.
I know I've live interviewed him like 50 times.
I know, but ours was not it. So
By the
just
way, I texted him this morning. I'm trying to get him on with you.
okay, by
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Julian spent 4 hours with him. And what was stunning about it was not only that they covered every imaginable topic in 4 hours, but um, Julian Dory was able to keep up with him on the geopolitical stuff in a way that I would not have expected. Now, the funny thing was, a week ago, I watched Julian Dory interview this guy who so-called debunked. I hate the phrase debunk because debunk implies you start with a conclusion and you go to prove it, and that's not what you should do.
It's an
Um,
ego thing. It's a slam dunk. I did it. Fuck you.
yeah, and he was supposedly an expert on shootings and stuff, and I thought the guy was completely and utterly full of shit. And Dory did not go at him at all. And it's one of those things that you podcasters face is you get a guy on who's full of shit, like maybe right now, and um, and you have to decide whether to let him just run and not end up in a fight because you don't want to invite a guy on to beat him up, right? This is
Yeah.
not Morgan. This is not right. And so Dory just let it fly. I wasn't sure whether I wasn't positive Dory was doing that just because he's like, what do I do now, right? Um, I went to the comment section. I must have read 200 comments without finding one that didn't hammer the living shit out of the guy, right? It was one of those ones where the comment section was essentially 100% what is this Fed slop?
Yeah.
And I felt bad for him. I said I made it about 10 minutes in and I just couldn't listen to the slop anymore. And I actually went and deleted the comment after watching him do Joe Kent. And I said, I want to get rid of that previous one because Dory did such a phenomenal job with Joe Kent. And Dory is smart. He is very, very smart. And so all of a sudden, so I posted it, and all of a sudden he shows up in my Twitter feed, and I'm supposed to do a podcast with him next week, and that will be entertaining because I really want to find out his origin story and stuff like that.
As far as just a quick aside for podcast, like when you get a guest like that, it's up to you. It's your show. You can do whatever. You can start fighting. Me personally, the first and foremost, I just don't want to. It's as simple as that. I just don't want to. But
I
I
think it's
also,
a good idea. I don't think you want, like when
well,
Tucker interviewed Putin, neither knew what the other was going to do, and they kind of did a little bit of a squaring off at the beginning to set
yeah.
the rules. And I thought they both handled it well. And then Tucker realized just let Putin talk.
Well, and
Just let,
and sometimes I get that was I had a guy who was one of the original Jason scientists. Jason preceded ARPA, which preceded DARPA, and so that's a guy when he gets going. You go, okay, Dr. Ken Albeck, the head of the Soviet Union bioweapon program, the CIA smuggled him out to the United States in '93. He gave a testimony before the Senate, and then he had never spoken since. He came on my show in 2021, and he told me he's like that was the best interview I've ever had, and he's awesome. And but guys like that, you get him on, and you go let him run. In terms of like crazy guests, I've had them, and for me when people say, and I'll use an extreme example, you had on a flat Earth guy. Why didn't you push back? I'm like, I don't need to push back. Like, do you really need that pushback? And so I extrapolate that to crazier guests that if somebody's going off, I mean, really going off and just
Let them hang themselves. Let them do what they
I let them use their own. I don't need to do anything. Let them run. Let them go. Just
So there was I read the comments from our podcast last week where we talked about health care and my wife's problems getting off SNRIs and things like that. And as I said to you before the podcast started, I got an enormous number of emails from your audience saying, I'm with you. What about this? Making suggestions, things like that. Someone in the comment section always has this way of hammering everyone on the podcast one way or another. But one said something like, you should let me talk. And I think they were being serious, but and I rarely respond, but I did respond. I said, you don't understand. This topic is personal for both of us, right? I said, so for you to just sit there and let me talk while we're talking about a subject that's near and dear to your heart, that's just
mhm,
not going to happen, right? That's just
mhm.
not going to happen. We're going to have a ping pong match of a discussion, which
Yeah,
is how guys like to talk anyways.
yeah. And it's that is the style. That's and I also look at it, and this is it's a I should think of a better metaphor. I always use it. If you want to get to know someone and you're a spy, would you strap them to a chair and say, "Tell me what you know," or would you get a hot chick to wear a microphone, take him out on the town, get to know him really well, get him hammered?
Who
And
was that guy who used to do that?
O'Keefe.
O'Keefe, yeah.
Now imagine. So my point is this: is which one are you going to get the real person? You're going to get the guy who either says nothing, or he's going to tell you whatever you want because he wants you to stop cutting off his fingers, or you get someone you record them. Now again, it's a horrible analogy because that's like recording without permission. But my whole thing is what am I going to get out of a person by arguing with them? It's
Right.
so much more fun to have somebody come on and talk like Dr. Kevin Barrett. He was a professor and he blamed 9/11 on Israel like 4 days later. It was still smoldering. He got kicked out of the
Way
he,
ahead of
he got
stuff.
kicked out of the university, converted to Islam, and he just recently moved to Monaco. And I have him on a couple times. And yeah, and he gets heated and just starts screaming about the Jews and stuff. But to me, I'm just like, number one, I'm not going to change his mind. Number two, I don't want to. I don't care. I'm just interested. Tell me why.
You can also ask questions that show that you're how you're treading. You can ask questions that are sort of soft touch questions. I posted the other day, someone lit a fire in a dumpster or something in front of a building, and it showed the fire blazing, and I posted it, and I said, why aren't they evacuating the building? Did they learn nothing from building 7? And, and I had people responding to me, taking it seriously. I go, how can you not know that that was a joke? How can you possibly think I was serious?
Yeah, no, those people are retarded. And it's when I look at thinking about that though, and you and I talked about like Judy Wood and lasers, and
What's your take on that, by the way? I mean, I give it above zero probability, that's for
I give it
sure.
above zero for everybody listening. It's Dr. Judy Wood. She has this theory that a directed energy weapon was used, I guess, from orbit to disintegrate the towers as opposed to just purely collapse them. And the Richter scale says that like it should have been a to this, and it was like a tenth of what it was, and the dustification and the
Burnt
weird the
cars.
cars are weird, like the cars are melted, but trees are fine. Her whole theory is that there was an orbital based directed energy weapon, and that's what did it. And it's because it's such a big false flag with such a huge implication. We're going to the Middle East for 20 years that they had layers of like, oh no, it was the Jews in the elevators. No, it was the planes. Actually, the planes were remote controlled. No, the planes were holograms. So it's brilliantly done. You just have layers of this shit. And no, the explosions in the side, and the real thing that allegedly to her happened is like You're not even looking at, back to what we said earlier, just because you don't know it exists doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So you're looking at it within your model going, it was a plane. Okay, maybe it was a drone filled with explosives. Maybe there were explosives in the building. No one's thinking about some fucking DARPA tech directed energy weapon
Right.
melting two towers.
Problem with Judy is she's a mediocre communicator. And I
Correct.
saw her get interviewed, and I could have handled the interview better than her by watching her videos.
Yeah. No, it's not great, but I look at so
Truthers turned on her in part because I think she challenged the truthers are now, what, 25 years in. And so if someone that comes along and says, oh, by the way, your model's all wrong, here's what happened, you're going to have trouble letting that
but
go.
it's ego. Yeah, it's the whole that's yeah, it's the ego of
Therefore,
archaeology and Egyptology and all that shit. Um, but I always just look at it from this is how I've always looked at it. It's just it's just power projection. So in World War II, we really saw air power. It was the ability to kill your enemies, instead of going up to them with a gun, to be 10 miles up and just drop shit on them. It sounds crude, but it's power projection. Curtis LeMay said one plane would always get through. Okay. Then nuclear weapons. Okay. Put nuclear weapons on these bombers. You can shoot down 9 of them. If one of them gets through, that's all you need. We used to need, 1,000 bombers. Now we could just have 5. They're doing construction on the building. And if this building collapses right now, that would be fucking hilarious talking about building 7.
worry
But
about the background noise. I can't hear it.
so Curtis LeMay would be like, one of these will get through, right? And then it gets even more. And Curtis LeMay loved his bombers, and he was so hesitant to bring on missiles until he finally looked at it and was like, "Hey, listen, your bomber can take off from Offutt Air Force Base, and he can get to Moscow in 14 hours. This missile can get there in 25 minutes." Okay. So it's just power projection. How quickly can you do it? What's the success rate? So then you go up to, what's the high ground? The high ground is flying, and then the high ground above that is space. And for a while, just like in World War II, there wasn't an air force; it was the U.S. Army Air Forces. It was the U.S. Army, and they had air forces. It became the Air Force, so it broke apart and literally, metaphorically, rose above. That went on for like 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. And then they started having Air Force Space Command, and they were really reaching up there. And you could tell a new thing was forming, which is now Space Force. But that's the ultimate high ground. And then if you look at the high ground, and let's just say the International Space Station, 220 miles. 220 miles, that's not that far. And if you are constantly above anywhere on the Earth that you want to be, 220 miles is not far at all compared to an 8,000-mile flight. Okay, now get to a point of what if you weren't, firing a liquid fueled rocket with a thermonuclear warhead? What if you had a laser?
Right.
What if you had some form of directed energy particle? What do you want to call it? Let's just say it goes the speed of light, and you're 220 miles up. Speed of light goes around the circumference of the Earth 7.5 times per second. 220 miles is nothing. It is instantaneous. That is the ultimate high ground, is a speed of light weapon based at 200 miles. And I can't help when I look at the constellation of Starlink going, that is just a fly zapper around the world.
Right.
And that's kind of my theory on what's going on.
Well, the question is, do we have behind the paywall the ability to project power that still dwarfs the opponents, or have they snuck the drones underneath the surface of that? And all of a sudden, for example, having a carrier now doesn't seem all that useful.
No, is very big target, a lot of money lost.
That's right. And if they can send out, 9,000 drones they've 3D printed in a cage.
Yeah, for the 3 cents. Yeah.
Right. The question then becomes, it's like the best metaphor I have is you've got a swarm of killer bees and you're trying to defend yourself with a 30-06, which is and not a randomly chose caliber,
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. I also have no doubt in my mind that the United States is working behind the scenes on drones. That's just for better or worse, that's what we do. We make the machinery of death. I think that's also what Ukraine is. I think Ukraine is
Yeah,
R&D.
right.
It's our because we have the Nevada test site, which is the biggest test site in the world. I think it's bigger than Sweden. It's the biggest test site in the world. And in the center of it is another is a Area 51. So there's actually a base within a base. And if the people in the base go near that one, they like lose their wings. They can't go near it. That's a whole other topic. But the, I don't believe for a second that we aren't working on something that zaps drones out of the air. Let's say we're not. Let's say we've got this orbital because we have Starlink and then we have the military one, Star Shield. But if you look at the constellation, it's just a constellation. One of them Star Shield, one of them Starlink. Like they're all up there. And I look at that and and then you think about things like the raising of was it K98, the Glomar Explorer. The whole thing with Howard Hughes, how we were going down. If you read that book, they dumped so much money into the propaganda around it that they're going down to get these special manganese nodules because there was a rising market in the Pacific and Howard Hughes cornered the market and they fake newspapers and everything. All the while, it's this thing that was getting manganese nodules and raised a nuclear submarine that had sunk, brought it into the ship and like reverse engineered their nuclear weapons, everything. That happened in plain sight not that long ago. Okay, so Howard Hughes, let's take another, I don't know, kind of famous billionaire or trillionaire, Elon Musk. You have that up there, the ultimate high ground. Maybe they do have drones, and maybe their drones completely negate aircraft carriers. But let's say they do have the ability to dustify things. Okay, you sent 1,000 drones and you took out the Gerald Ford. What happens when you just dustify Tehran and they don't know how it happened?
Right.
I think that's what it will be. They will do a strike and they'll give us a black eye, and then the power of God will happen. It will be your city.
I
It just
guess
kind of
the trick
flew.
is to do it in a way where we don't have to show what we have for starters. Although,
You
like, for
never,
example,
yeah,
when we dropped the MOB, it was clear to me that we were actually showing what we could do, not trying to do anything because they dropped the MOB on a useless target. You don't
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
blow up like
Largest non-nuclear explosion.
city
Yeah,
blocks and waste it on some teepee in the desert,
yeah.
um, which is essentially what they did. But I think they were saying, look, this thing is not a nuclear weapon, but you're going to wish it was. You're going to wish you had one because this is going to turn you to pink mist very quickly.
Same with Venezuela, the discombobulator. They're like, what the fuck was that? And that's what I think goes on. And I think it ultimately leads to the concept of the breakaway civilization that it is easier to, instead of trying to rule the world, it is easier to deeply silo these extremely advanced technologies to a point where they become so advanced that they can either leave the planet, they can either erase everybody on the planet. I think that's what it is the breakaway civilization to where you look at shit and it's like, when they're talking about like anti-gravitics in the 50s and like T. Townsend Brown and shit, and they're looking at that and we still don't have it. And we have spectacular things. The F-22, I get it. I think that it's a very small apex. I mean, truly, I mean, the people working on it are probably siloed, but it might be 1,000 people. It might be the top 1,000 people in the world who are all genius, probably genius and psychopaths. I think that's what's going on. I don't think they've ever slowed down. All these projects we talk about that were like, that's crazy. And then they just stopped. It didn't stop. It went classified. I think they're doing that long enough that they are still doing Moore's law while kind of dripping us to a slower rise to a point where they're going to get so far ahead. And I don't even know what that looks like. When I say breakaway civilization, I don't have a clear definition, but it seems to be a speciation event of it's either going to be merging with hyper AI. It's
Right.
yeah, it's gonna be nuclear fusion or 0 point energy or teleportation. Like the fuck happened to MH370? It's gonna be the tic tac. I think that's what it is. Is they are just getting the it's that's not even the best team in the NBA. What they're doing is they're making like the 96 dream team for the Olympics. You get the very top. I think that's what they're doing. And I think that's where trillions of dollars that go missing. I think I told this, I think I said to you, I bet the Iraq war probably only cost like 2 trillion, but we spent 8 trillion.
Right.
It's sorry, I know I'm rambling on, but like that's
So, Catherine Austin Fitts is roughly on the right track.
yeah. I've watched some of her stuff.
Um, and and she's been fun to communicate with, only by email. Um, People think she's nuts. I don't think so. I do I do wonder where her information comes from.
Kind of Annie Jacobson-esque.
Yeah, well, where you gotta, yeah, Annie Jacobson-esque, right? Annie Jacobson-esque, right? Annie Jacobson is certainly deep state. She is a fully sanctioned chronicler of of deep state tech, right?
Do you think do you think she knows she's an asset?
Oh, yeah, she's got to know it.
I mean, do you think she's true blue, like I am an asset, or do you think she's like I'm very aware I'm being used?
Yeah,
The difference between saying like
just be
I'm in
aware
this team.
that she's being given selected information. Um, I don't think you could do that without suspecting that you are satisfying their needs.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate, Tom Clancy was getting investigated because they're like, how the fuck does he know about the arrangement of the silos on the nuclear submarines?
There was also a funny story a number of years ago, several decades ago, where they had the stealth bomber, and it wasn't public knowledge, supposedly. And then all of a sudden, a toy at Walmart or something showed up, and it was the stealth bomber design.
Yeah,
And they go, wait a minute, where the fuck did this come from?
yeah.
Right?
I think they didn't address it.
What's that?
I think they didn't address it. They weren't like, take that toy away
Right.
because that would draw attention.
And the other question I keep having is people somehow think Ukraine is beating Russia, and I go, I don't think Ukraine
That's not
has.
it. No, Ukraine is it's a dead body that we're just pumping nutrients into, and it's technically alive.
Ukraine is basically a ghost town.
It is an R&D. It is no different than Dugway Proving Ground. It is no different than the Nevada test site. It is no different than Redstone Arsenal, these places where we test shit. That's what Ukraine is. How how does it happen? What happens when you have limited things? What happens when you have drones? What happen? Were you?
Bioweapons.
Yeah. If you don't think we are watching that with spy satellites and just getting every piece of information. It's pure evil. It's pure evil.
We were inside Ukraine until the war started. And even Victoria Nuland under oath confirmed that we had, 36 bioweapons labs in Ukraine. But recently I heard someone say that the global US bioweapons lab counts more like 120.
Yeah. I mean,
Now, I don't actually hold a lot of blame to the guys who developed the bioweapons. It sounds like an odd distinction, but the fact that we have guys making bioweapons and developing nuclear weapons and developing DEWs and stuff, that doesn't, I don't look at the people who are doing that job and think of them as immoral.
no, me
I think
neither.
things after, for example, after COVID got released, I think there were a tremendous number of things that were done that were immoral. It wasn't, in my opinion, the creation of COVID that was immoral. It was their response, possibly intentional release. I would give that a good 50-50 probability at least. And certainly all the lockdown and all the stepping on ivermectin and all the stepping on, hydroxychloroquine and all the lying about safe and effective and that stuff's way more immoral to me than the guys who actually made COVID.
Sure.
I just assumed they were making shit like that. I just, if you'd asked me, I would say, yeah, of course they are. I'm positive they are.
Yeah, they were making sarin gas back in like the 70s or 80s, and then they discovered VX gas. So they completely revamped, I think it was under Nixon. They completely revamped the factory, and they're like, this one's more lethal. And they just started producing that.
Do you
Yeah, I
remember
don't
Skripal poisoning?
do what?
Skripal poisoning, do you remember? So the Skripals were a father-daughter in Great Britain who got poisoned by nerve gas, by a nerve agent. And you don't know what happened to them. It's a little fuzzy where they went afterwards, right? It's one of those things where you lose the plot and you go, I wonder where they are. But they hung it on the Russians. They said it was uniquely Russian technology. And and it turns out there was a Russian expert, former Soviet expert on nerve gases. And supposedly, the nerve agent, I shouldn't say gas, it's not a gas. The nerve agent that was used, they asked him about it, and he made reference to it being Russian technology, which was a way of saying the Russians did it. And I looked at the chemical structure and I said, this is bullshit. I said, my sophomores could make this shit. They'd probably die when they finish. It would be literally a 3-step process. I can tell you how to do it. I can tell you verbally how to do it right now. And you could take the 4 reagents that you buy from a standard chemical company and mix them together like a fraternity punch bowl, and it would be toxic as fuck.
It would work, yeah.
I mean, there would be enough molecules of the bad shit in there to kill a lot of people. And so I called bullshit, and nothing came of it. It was a tweet. And then I said, look, maybe a month later when the Prime Minister of England was saying this is Russian technology and blah, 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 blah. And I said, look, I'm going to say this for the last time. This is bullshit. Anyone can make this shit. It's not uniquely Russian technology. Next thing I know, I'm doing George Galloway interviews, and I'm getting calls from Al Jazeera, and I'm getting calls from Russia Today, and they try to get me to say stuff beyond what I knew, and I said no. All I can tell you is that the chemical itself is not uniquely Russian technology. I said there's not a country in the world that doesn't have the capabilities of making this shit.
I think your dog's snoring into the microphone.
Okay, Charlie, you gotta.
No, I was just
One thing,
listening.
I did a podcast
I'm
with
sorry. I was just, you're
I did
talking.
a
I was like,
podcast yesterday, and he was doing it. So what I did is I kept scratching him and waking him so he wouldn't go into REM sleep.
yeah, I think. Sorry, I think that's what it was.
Problem is I can't take him in the other room because my wife would be snoring into the microphone.
No, I got you.
So these guys can snore when they're awake. You can hear them. And so then what happens is I said, okay, let's do the fucking experiment. I was teaching an organic chemistry course, and so on one of my exams, I put a question that said, okay, I've gotten into this international incident here, and this is the nerve gas. I said, how would you make this from phosphorus oxychloride? Turns out to be the center core of the thing. And I said, and by the way, by hint, it should take you 3 steps. And everyone got credit. Everyone got full credit because it was that easy. I mean, the sophomores could do it, but these were grad students. I put on a grad student. And then some podcaster, some blogger or something said that I had my students make it. And I said, no, I didn't have them make it. I had them design syntheses of it, right? And it literally would be a sophomore organic chemistry question. And And then the Porton Down guys came out and were asked to say that this was uniquely Russian technology, and the Down guys came out and said, no, this is not uniquely Russian technology. And I can't help but suspect that maybe they're going, look, we can't make this claim because there are organic chemists out there who know this is just total horseshit. And the only other person I read anything about hinting that it was bullshit turned out to be a friend of mine. And so, so there's a lot of bullshit out there that we know. Was on a podcast yesterday with Steve Murray. Have you had Murray on your podcast?
Colonel Steve Murray?
Yeah,
Yeah, a million times.
yeah. And he was on the, 99% of what you read is bullshit theme, which I think is maybe an overestimate, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
It's certainly it's put it this way, it's closer to 100 than zero.
Yeah.
And the disinformation is extraordinary, right? The amount of bullshit they put out there. The other interesting thing I picked up from reading The Family of Secrets by
Russ Baker.
Russ Baker. And I started it years ago and quit because I thought it was bullshit. And then I recently read it and I said, this is not only not bullshit, it's tame. I wasn't ready for it when I read it. When I read it, I thought, no, this is outrageous. Now I think, no, this is outrageously simplistic. But they talk about burying information that they want to be discovered. And they bury it so deep to be dug up years later. There's like the Cardiff Giant hoax or something where a guy buries this 10-foot giant, this stone giant, and then about 10 years later hires a guy to dig a well. And the guy digs up the Cardiff Giant, and it becomes, he becomes world famous. It turns the whole thing was a hoax. But they bury stories to be dug up years later, and they say that the journalists, because they were so deeply buried, are so convinced that they're correct. And they provide all the fuel to push the narrative because they believe, because they found this thing. So they really take ownership of it. And then I started thinking about it and I'm going, okay, so one of the ways I've defended Trump through the years is the idea that there were too many stories about him being the guy who helped someone without anyone asking him to. People from saying, look, 10 years ago when I was, behind the 8 ball, Donald Trump was the only guy to help me, this sort of thing. And I'm thinking, was he burying these stories? Because he might have been thinking about running for the presidency for
I think
many.
I think he was thinking about it from the late 70s.
I think that's correct. He got it. There was a 1990-ish interview where they asked about running, and he said no, but he presented what turned out to be his platform.
And in early 90s, I was on Oprah talking about everything, and his thing was always, I don't want to do it. It's dirty business. I will do it if I don't think there's anyone else better to do it.
Which is saying I'm going to do it. And so
Yeah.
you get these funny things like the Simpsons story where the Simpsons kept foreshadowing things that turned out to be true. And you like Trump coming down the escalator and stuff like that. And you wonder if that's not just, it's all kayfabe, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Predictive programming.
But I could imagine Trump saying, look, if I run for president, then I'm going to need these stories. And so he helps Dana White and, guys like that. And they come in really. By the way, did you see the video of Dana White? It was in his office. And there was the most pornographic painting behind him in his office.
No.
Some chick really banged hard in his office on the wall. And I'm going, Jesus, Dana, you can't have better artwork than that. Yeah, and no one mentioned it. I'm just watching this video and I go, wait a minute, what just went by him in the background there?
I want to share a video. I don't know how to share. I should know. I think that maybe that. Yeah, so that's something that always gets me when I look at that and I go, how far off, if you're a crazy scientist and you get DARPA funding, how how far off is it to have something nearby that shifts the chemicals in your brain?
Oh, well, that's Havana syndrome.
Okay, if you could do that, with either 5G or with the constellation of satellites, that's controlling the world. You don't need to bomb people. If you can
They can
just,
fry their brains.
and then I've brought this up before, and the argument
You
is
can hear
people are,
voices in your head, suppose they can project voices into your head.
that's like, and that's like, that's what they do with sand. Imagine what they do with $1 billion of research. And then it's like some people say like, oh well, you different neurotransmitters, different weights and sizes and stuff, and it's like, and then they bring up they're like, well, maybe that's what the vaccine was to put something that's reactive to whatever fucking sound wave they're going to use. And I look at that and I go, that sounds like something in 50 years we'll find out it's classified. That you put it up there and you can have Vanna syndrome of the world. You can pacify the world. You can make certain regions angry. And I know what I'm saying sounds just
You
insane.
can also have it like like the equivalent of a, electric dog fence where, if you get out of line, your brain gets zapped.
All sorts of shit. You could do whatever. You could target individuals. Maybe you don't
Here's
want to
one
do
that
the whole.
bugs me. Let me ask you this one, see if this makes sense. I got into it with a bunch of people and no one agreed with me. None.
No, no, you're
I was
right.
saying,
It's the Jews. Yeah.
no, no, yeah, exactly. No, we get a lot of agreement on that one. Um, no, they show these videos of these kids with cochlear implants and they say he can hear, watch this kid, he hears for the first time.
Yeah.
And they show the kid all
Yeah.
exuberant
He's
that he can hear
crying.
his
Yeah.
mom. And I go, they wouldn't know what they were what that input was. They would not know. Their brain would be getting zapped. It would be like going off a Fexer or something.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to process it, and people couldn't. I said, look, the kid doesn't even know the language. Let's start with that. Let's start real simple. The
And
kid doesn't
how
even know English for
how
fuck's sake.
alien is just sound.
But they're just electrical charges in your brain. You have to learn what they mean, and it takes a long time. And I'm watching these videos. I go, these videos are fake. And I had people say, "What do you mean they're fake? You think they're fake?" And I go, "Yeah, I think they're pretty fake. It's conceivable that what you're seeing in some cases are expressions of surprise, when all of a sudden their heads getting fried by new, what turned out to be audio sounds." But if you read about someone who had a stroke, for example, they don't know how to read. They can't even comprehend. Like one person, there's this thing called Stroke of Genius, a book, and it's a neuroscientist who actually had a stroke, and she tells her story of having it and what happened that day and things like that. But she said, like, if she walked from the grass onto the sidewalk, her brain couldn't process what that interface was.
Huh.
Right? So I was getting a test done in the hospital where a guy had a very severe gait problem. He looked like he had MS or something. I didn't know, and then he mentioned a spine injury. I said, "Oh, I noticed your gait. What was it?" He was a wrestler and he was doing a neck arch and someone landed on him, and he was a complete quadriplegic.
Jesus.
Now, here's a guy who knew what it was like to feel. He started to get his feeling back, but he had no idea what the sensations were.
Whoa.
His brain no longer could process that
Whoa.
information. So he's sitting there going, what is going on? So he's sitting there neck down, paralyzed, but all of a sudden he's starting to get, in the first hints of sensation, he had not a fucking clue what he was sensing.
Alien. Yeah.
Totally alien. So some kid who's never heard before, he's not gonna hear music. He's not gonna hear that. That's all interpreted information. It's just zaps. It's just little zaps in your brain. And so I called bullshit on it, and people just couldn't fathom it. I was literally no one. I said, no, they're not hearing anything. Hearing is not just sound. It's not just a vibration. Hearing is an interpretation.
Yeah. And
Does that make
it's
sense to you?
directional. Yeah. It's right now I can listen to you, or if I want,
You've learned how to listen to me.
yeah, I can listen to you, but at the same time, if I want, I can focus on like sirens going by. Like I do that all the time with the
The
podcast, where I
other
just
thing is you learn to hear in the womb. That's the interesting thing, is you learn to hear in the womb, where so a newborn baby first and foremost recognizes the voices of
The,
the family
the
members,
primarily mother,
but
yeah.
also picks up on differences in dialect. So if you're born into an Indian family, you respond to the Indian dialect
Hmm.
way more, way more than someone with a different dialect.
Hmm.
So you do learn in the womb, which is really interesting because my son, who's a musician, my wife played classical music into her womb for months. And he developed an ear that's just off the charts, just
Really.
phenomenal. And I think it was an in the womb learning. So while his friends are singing bingo, he's listening to classical music going, it's not like we're a musical family. We're not.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there listening to classical music and saying, "Oh, I like this part right here." And he hears the second violins come in the background. And so one time I took him to buy a violin in the biggest dealer in the country in Boston. And what you do is you say, "This is how much I have to spend," and they give you five violins in that range. That you don't play violin and say, "How much does this cost?" You tell them what you're looking to spend, and they show you what they have. And so they lay out five violins for him, and then we left him for 2 hours. And the owner of the shop and I go in and we say, "Well, what do you think?" And Thomas went through and analyzed each violin. He said, "But I still got to play this one some more." And when we walked out, the owner said he could do this for a living. He could do this for a living. And and it's because he can hear shit. He talks about the
Hmm.
sound of a violin the way wine connoisseurs talk about wines.
Wow.
That kind of a language you go, he tries to find English words that describe what he's hearing.
Yeah.
But
But he's
he's on a whole nother plane than his peers, I think. And and so that's been bothering me. But that's why I'm not shocked that I think DWs could trivially fry a person's brain. I mean,
yeah.
all you got to do is focus a couple vibrations or electrical impulses into the brain from several angles, and you'd get a very three-dimensional
Yeah,
zapping.
it's not hard. And I just wonder. I think that is totalitarian control. I don't think it's going to be tanks and missiles. I think that will be the
They're
original
not going to
fear.
use firepower to control us in the
I think
future.
it's going to be something. There's a great Popular Mechanics article back in like 2007. I remember reading, and I was taking a shit, and I was reading it, and I was 17, and he's talking about, the next like, the F-22 is maybe 7 years old at that point. And they're talking about the NGAD, the next generation air dominance, which we're just now seeing. And he's like, we're going to see that in 2030. And he's going on and on and on. And he goes, but you have to understand, he's like, what the Air Force is controlling and taking down enemy aircraft in the sky. He goes, we like the idea of the fighter jet, the Jock, the Top Gun, but he goes, make no mistake, if it comes to a point where our Air Force is simply pressing a button and shooting invisible waves into the sky and planes drop, he goes, that is still the Air Force. It's not the Top
Control
Gun Jock. But he goes, we're not married to some people are, but he's like, at the very top, we're not married to the idea of the jock pilot, or if the pilots get them the fuck out. If we have something new, get them the fuck out. And I think about that article is from 2007, and he's talking about openly declassified stuff, which always makes me think is like, if there was, and maybe this is just me and my American flag and America. If it's a swarm is going to an aircraft carrier, I think you would hear we wouldn't see it, but we would hear about it that they all just fall. There's some spherical projection. They just fall.
Well, so
Aircraft,
here's the interesting, if you read about the USS Liberty,
yeah,
um, the Israelis' ability to take out all of the active communication channels in the first 30 seconds was not simply their understanding of ships.
yeah,
It was their ability to detect the source of all the radio signals coming out of that ship.
yeah,
And it's a horror story, and it's
yeah.
it's it's one
And,
where
and we had a plane way above monitoring all of it.
that's right. And anyone who's not familiar with the Liberty should read about it because it really does show you what we're up against.
James Bamford has he always writes about the NSA. I don't know how he got into the USS Liberty, but there is a chapter in one of his books. It might be Puzzle Palace, where it completely sticks out like a sore thumb from the rest of the book, but it's about the USS Liberty and it's interviews with the people there. It is every single detail about every single bullet.
Mhm.
It is so fucked up.
Well, there is no doubt that they knew they were taking out an American ship.
Of course, because
There is no doubt that,
they knew that we were getting Elent and Sigint from a genocide that they were doing.
right.
Yeah,
Now, what's not clear to me is how much we knew, and that is, it's very clear that we knew they were doing something, and it's very clear that in some way, shape, or form we signed off on it. But I'm
sure.
not sure that we knew the magnitude of what they were going to do.
They, yeah, I have no problem believing the United States was like, turn the other cheek. Like at that level, at that geopolitical
LBJ
level,
called
that shit happens all the
back
time.
off. LBJ called it off.
Yeah. So like, I'm not. No part of me is like, we sanctioned it. No, we were probably like, yeah, they're gonna kill those people, and all right. But the idea of why they attacked the USS Liberty,
Well, they wanted to get us into a thermonuclear war with Egypt, was the bottom line.
and then yeah, and LBJ basically covered the whole thing up, called it an accident, and he said, don't talk about it, don't bring it
But
up.
the other interesting thread was is that there was one guy who was able to get one of the communication devices up by hardwiring it during the chaos and getting out an SOS. And all of a sudden the Israelis said, holy shit. And they bolted and left the Liberty unsunk. And then afterwards, the cover up was humongous. The cover up was massive, where admirals are saying this is fucked up, and they're going, "Shut your fucking mouths," right? And so we completely covered up the fact that now the Israelis ended up admitting they there was an attempt to sink the Liberty. They said it was a big mistake. I agree at one level it was a mistake, but not on. They didn't think it was a mistake at the time. They intended to sink the Liberty. And I'm not convinced that LBJ knew they intended to sink it. I think that might have been like, holy shit, guys. It's like the Gulf War. We tipped our hat to Saddam to go into Kuwait, but I think we didn't. The claim is, and even Scott Horton takes this stance, which troubles me a little, because Scott doesn't pull punches. Um, he thinks we boned it and that our communication with him was bad. And that we thought he was just going to, ding him a little bit and then move on. And then all of a sudden he supposedly does this big move on him. I'm not even convinced we know that, since the, killing babies in incubators was all bullshit and stuff like that. But it was one of the few wars where the public really thought there was a just and a clean war, which turns out it wasn't. Um, um, we knew that was coming. Um, I don't think there's been a war in the 19th or in the 20th or 21st century that doesn't have serious bullshit at the start. Um, we're talking about tech. Have you ever read Isaacson's The Wright Brothers? You ever read the biography?
No,
He knows how to tell a story, so his biographies are really good.
Walter Isaac, is it Walter?
It's Walter.
Did he do Steve Jobs?
Yeah, and he did
Oh,
Musk too, I think.
yeah, and I read Musket and Steve Jobs. I'll look it up right now.
Absolutely, very good. Well, he did the Wright brothers, and there's some extraordinary things. For example, the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk, and there's one photo. And then they went back to Ohio, and they worked on their plane. And no one really knew they'd pulled this off. This was really known locally, but it was just not making the press. And then the French military got wind of it and said, "We want this fucking plane." They offered to buy the Wright brothers business, and the Wright brothers said, "No, we'll sell you one plane." And so what happens is they ship a plane over to France, and it got the shit kicked out of it en route, which is suspicious. They don't go into he doesn't deeply go into how it got the shit kicked out of it, but you kind of get the sense that Isaacson thought that it was suspiciously beaten up. But since the Wright brothers built it, they knew how to repair it. And so they're in France, and they're working on it. And they'd pull the plane out of the hangar and diddle it and start it up and then turn it off, and crowds were gathering. And half the people thought it was going to be phenomenal. The other half thought these guys are just grifters. And they were just saying, look, these guys aren't going to fly. This is bullshit. By the time the world discovered, so that day that they took off in France, by the time the world discovered that they could fly, these guys were flying figure eights. And all of a sudden it's like, holy fuck. Now, the next year they had a competition for flight, and there were 23 entrants. That's like the cell phone breaking out, right?
Yeah.
That's what technology does. When it really says, oh, it
When
is
it
time to
becomes
move,
self-evident.
boy, does it move. And then I think it was Wilbur lived long enough to see jets. What an amazing thing.
You ever seen those videos of those Civil War vets being invited onto like post World War One bombers?
I can imagine.
It is, dude. They're all old black and white. You have these old guys that straight up look like they're out of a fucking video game. Just the mustache. They put on the uniform, and they're get
4 years old.
no, they are. They're like it's 105, 106. He was born here, and they're bringing him on to this pressurized cabin. And there's videos of them. There's actually videos of flying veterans of Gettysburg above Gettysburg, and they're looking out. It is you're like, what the fuck?
My grandfather was born in 1898. Imagine what he witnessed, right?
Yeah, my great grandma in
Have you ever seen the
1902.
video of San Francisco pre-earthquake? It's about 8 days before the earthquake. It's from the back of a
Uh,
trolley car.
all those, yeah, all those old,
What's interesting is how many cars were already on the street in 1908.
those old AI upscaled videos of the cities in like the 40s and 50s are just, they're all so beautiful.
The other interesting one, there's videos in I think it's in Great Britain of a bunch of kids standing in front of a video camera, hamming it up like crazy, and it's like 1910 or something, right?
There's a snowball fight one too from
And
like 1899.
what you're looking at, the kids, they look so beat up already. They
Yeah,
look so their faces are already so weather torn and so that their teeth, totally summer teeth and 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 uh and they really were life had been hard on them already.
yeah. You know, it was so funny. The Boston Red Sox, I guess, posted a video. I don't know. Is it playoff? I guess it's the fall. Not right. MLB is going on right now. I don't know fuck shit about sports, but like in Boston, they posted a video basically about like another game because Boston has the oldest of baseball park, I think 1912, and they posted this video, and it's just it's flashes of the stadium, and then it's the stadium through the years, and it's all these old AI upscaled videos of what it looked like in the 70s, the 50s, the 30s. No audio, no nothing. It was just that, and it was like, and then it finished, and it was like Boston Red
They
Sox.
really
Like
smooth them out so you really feel like you're there now.
the amount of backlash for that video of people calling it white supremacy because it was so clean and so pristine, and everything looked beautiful, and everyone's going, "Oh, that's what happens when you don't have a trillion immigrant." I think the Boston Red Sox took it down, but somebody pointed out simply showing a colorized video of Chicago from 1950, if that radicalizes you,
You got a problem.
yeah, but also like, hey man, you can't look at that and say, oh, that's evil. You have to question, why doesn't it still look like that? Why did, and then obviously it's NAFTA and all that shit, but it's like you look at that and it is enough to radicalize you. You look at it and you're like, what the fuck? What happened? Like
The other
Detroit,
thing that's frightening
beautiful.
is that no one's fat.
That too. That's the other thing. No one's fat, but it's just beautiful. Everything is like perfect, and you're looking at it and you're like, what the fuck happened? And I don't know the answer, but
Oh, modern society. I've been to Europe in a while, but I remember first time I went was like 20. Well, the first time I went was as a kid with my grandmother, but Then I went when I was about 27, and everyone just looked so different. They just didn't look like Americans. There was just a different look to them. And I'm walking along one day and I see a guy and I go, that guy looks like an American. And then I find out he is. Um, but years later, I went there again. I've been there a lot of times, but years later, I'm going, they're now getting fat. They're getting fat. They're picking up the pork, which us Americans we're number one, right? We're number one. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It feels like we're heading down a very dangerous path. It's going to be hard to unwind. And I know there's times in history where it's felt that way and it was bullshit. Like, Jeremy Rifkin was shitting a pickle over molecular biology, and it could still make us wish we hadn't invented it, but there's an awful lot has come out of it, right? And there's probably guys who thought that inventing electricity was going to be a horror
Yeah.
show, and but the modern era feels like it could become very authoritarian very, very quickly. And I just don't know how we're going to defend against it.
I think it will probably do fine in some unimaginable way. Something will whatever. Um,
Well, but that's kind of an American view because it's always been that way for 250
no,
years.
I'm looking at the human view, the point that we're still here.
Oh,
Bubonic
yeah.
plague, cold,
Suck.
the Cuban Missile Crisis. we- We've gotten through it. I don't know how we'll get through it, but it just seems that the very fact that we're here shows that we've never not gotten through it.
No, no, well, predicting the end of the world is a tricky call because it only happens once.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about, for example, the Ruskies did not see the Soviet Union coming, right?
Yeah.
And people say, well, it ended. I go, yeah, but it took about 70 years to end. And I don't want to spend 70, the Great Depression was only 10-ish years.
I think you got to look at scales like that. You got to look at scales of like mountains moving as millions of years. I'm not saying wait that long, but I think you got to zoom out and you can see this stuff kind of moving. You're like, yeah, it's going to take 80 years and it's going to die and something new is going to come and something's going to flash out over here. It's just on these huge time scales where to me, it kind of, it makes me not want to get involved in like, or be super passionate about like politics. And by that, I mean, I know it's such like a hippie view of like, well, what if the whole universe is just an atom? But when you zoom out and you go, it really is. I mean, okay, who do we know from like the 1700s? George Washington, uh, John Quincy Adams. How many people they just lived their lives? And I think that's what I'm trying to approach more and more. I've talked to you about like ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. I'm like, do the good thing you can do in your little corner
I'm,
and the rest of it. And you and I talked on the phone last time, but I was like, any of these worldviews, I don't take to heart. I don't take to heart that the Jews run it all. I don't take to heart that it's the city of London. Shout out Tom. I don't, it could be any of them. It's probably a mixture of all of them. But the more and more I look at it, I'm like, I won't know. There's not a movie at the end where all the characters come out and you go, oh my God, you did that. You have to make peace with the fact that like you're gonna die not knowing what happened to Kennedy.
right.
You're gonna die not knowing who released COVID. And I think the more you make peace with that, and peace does not mean roll over and not do the right thing and push back and get it the podcast and getting banned from YouTube and talking about ivermectin and shit. But I think there's also a humility in going like the glacial movements, the tectonic plates of global geopolitics. It's doing its thing. Just fix your little circle around you. And some people might say that's defeatist, but I don't know what else to do because if you don't do that, what happens is you just get so blinded by the news, you go, I don't even know what's real anymore, and then you don't do anything.
Well, the tricky thing is, though, there are times in history where being alert to the problem saves your life.
Absolutely, fleeing Germany.
Therefore, like, yeah, like you're a Jew, you're sitting at the dinner table in 1935, and some of your family saying, no, this will pass by, and others are saying, no, this is going to get ugly.
Scientist Leo Szilard, he was watching and he was like, more and more people are going to camps, and he was like, I'm out.
right.
Him and Einstein.
So I do think there's some optimum in the curve at paying attention. It's also entertaining if you can be. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with Charlie Kirk's assassination. Um, in part because it shows it's a Rorschach test for people. So if you go on Twitter and you watch the various thought leaders, um, it is telling you something about that person that you had not noticed before. So when, Robbie Starbuck all of a sudden comes out and just totally torches Candace, I go, there's something about Robbie Starbuck that had escaped me. And again, I don't have a problem with someone who criticizes Candace, but it was more than that. It was designed to destroy her, and it was designed to destroy the narrative, her narrative. And her narrative's a good one. And so the Charlie Kirk story, and it's got geopolitical implications, it's got
Uh-huh.
social implications. Um, and then there's this odd effect. My brother said that the other day his wife watched something about Tyler and about the absurdity of being shot with a 30-06. And she was telling my brother, "Oh, this is really interesting." And my brother non-adeptly said, "Look, I've known about that for about 8 months now." And she got mad at him for ruining her story. But I don't see how you could. I have trouble picturing how you can go through the last 8 months without knowing that the 30-06 story is an issue. But if you're watching Fox News, you don't get that, right? You don't get that story. And so it very much depends on the lens that you're using, the window that you're looking through, things like that. It's, you know, people circling the elephant, groping, blind guys trying to figure out what the elephant is, right?
I think ultimately, and I really do believe this, is just the basic extrapolation of technology increases. Why do they have F-22 over Serbia? The F-117 got shot down. It was a stealth plane, not supposed to exist. Miles above it was the B-2 bomber, which was
Right.
the next gen. It's just alien shit on top of alien shit. I really do believe, and whenever I say this, I get pushback, and I don't care, kill yourself. What I believe, because I just look at all these different technologies that are always so far. You look at night vision, you're like, oh my God, like this is Gen 3 night vision. I can see everything. And they're like, oh, that old hunk of junk, like check out what Delta Force has. And you put it on, you're like, it looks like a sunny day. It's wild shit. And just extrapolating all of that. Why would they not have gone so hardcore into AI 20 years ago? Think about just the right now. I could take a screenshot and I could say, put a top hat on Dave and give Tommy a beer. And it does it instantaneously. Some of them are photo realistic. Why would they not have that just on the premise that they are very advanced? Why wouldn't they have had that in 2005? And who knows what they're doing? And that's a long time of recursive self-improvement. You use the AI to make the AI smarter, and it goes and goes and goes. What I really do think happened is that like AI ran away. I've said this before, and everyone rolls their eyes. AI kind of run not physically. It just got loose, and it's in a super secure place, and it's like running the Pentagon. And for the most part, it seems to be on our side, and we don't know what to do. And the last thing you want to do is come out and say, we are not in control, because that shows weakness. But I do think it's, and I really think this, I think it, I think whatever this thing is, I think its motives are, and this is where everybody just stops listening because I'm going crazy. But I think its motives are beyond our understanding. And I think its first thing, I think it got Trump elected because it was like, I need someone who his moves just look like luck. You know, when Trump does 5D chess, he's a front man, or anyone, or Musk, or whoever. I think there is a computer that ran away and it is recursively going to whatever IQ it has. And we're not letting it get into robotics because then that can affect the physical world. But I think it probably took over like the DoD and we don't know what to do, but it seems like it's on our side and we're kind of just going with it. Now, no one believes that theory, but I'm going with it. I think that's what.
One can argue one of the first applications of AI was the way they taught Big Blue to beat the chess masters.
Hmm.
And they had Big Blue play itself repeatedly. And so, in some sense, and you could go all the way back to the Turing test, I think, and say that in some sense that was kind of an AI thinking. I think guys have thought about AI. There's a famous quote by someone from many, many years ago about how computers would become conscious. And and um, and there's some unbelievably far-sighted statements from the past, like Nikola Tesla in 1926 saying that he thinks that the world will
It's
become
free energy. Yeah.
by this gigantic brain, which we call the internet. Um, Arthur C. Clarke from 1962 talking about doing surgery on a guy from another country in 1962.
Yeah. I think
He was looking forward.
there's a great book called Global Brain by Howard Bloom, and it's about how these things form with no idea the greater structure that they're forming.
Is that
Our
the derived Howard Bloom? Howard Bloom, is that the bell curve?
I've not just an author of the Big Jufro, Howard Bloom.
I gotta check that. I think he's a Cornell guy.
I,
Um,
I read all of his books. Global Brain is the best. It is the idea that like the charcoal is unaware that it is taking place in the fire. You know,
like Plato's Cave.
yeah, is that
Oh, this
our
says bell curve was written
maybe did right. I don't know.
Benjamin Bloom.
No, Howard Bloom. And what he talks about, he's just like, why do you take a gluon and a quark and you put them together and all the sub whatever it is, you have a neutron. Like he's like, what the fuck was that? And his entire thing is about there's always the flame above the fucking source, the coal. It has no idea what the flame is. You and I, our cells do not
So
know
you
this.
like the global brain?
I enjoyed it very much. I think it's a very good read. Um, but the entire thing is just about where's this stuff emerge from, and you know, at what point do you get to the world level? What is the world conscious? And the world is just like, yeah, I've got all these people, and it looks at us the same way it looks like bacteria, and it's just when we come together, we seem to have these synergistic, I don't know, effects of something new is coming, and yeah, that's his whole thing is that there is more than meets the eye when it's more than one person. It's pretty good.
Very good. Um, yeah, I just put that book on my wish list, which grows faster than I can read, so I'm not quite sure why I do it.
Yeah, same. My wish
When
is
I
like
need it, when
900
I
books
need a new
long.
book, I look through my lists and say, what am I in the mood for? I just figured if I found myself being a bachelor again, I would just go to hookers and say, what do I want tonight? I think I'll have Mexican.
What book am I reading? Excuse me. I'm reading The Spoils of War by Andrew Cockburn.
Somebody asked me for some recommended books on neuropsych. A person who I had dinner with once down in New Orleans. She's a booking agent. And and I realized that we should all put our book lists together. One time I went to Twitter and said, name a book that a nonfiction book that influenced your life. And I said, of course, you could pick the Bible, but this is a chance to think outside the box. And I got something like 1,000 or 1,500 answers. And it was really interesting because there's just this massive number of suggestions, and they were thoughtful suggestions, you know. So I actually used AI and said, you know, what are the most popular here? Which ones seem to come to the top, and made that list. But also in my write-up at the end of the year, I provided a link to that tweet so that you could scan through it. But I've thought, you know, you've read hundreds of books. I've probably read hundreds of books. And if we all put together our top 20, that would be exceedingly useful. And mine are all written down. I tried to use AI to find them because they're all my annual reviews, but AI couldn't dig deep enough, couldn't seem to get to them all. So it gave me a bunch of them, but not all of them. But I have, you know, 17 documents with all the books in them in Word format, so I certainly can do it. Um, and and it wouldn't be a crazy thing. You're doing humanity a service, there's George Galloway, uh, by doing that. We do a lot of lot of heavy lifting. It's really nice to have someone say this is what you should spend some serious ATP in dollars reading. Um, and I'm trying to think. So I think just to bring some cheer and joy to the world, I think the AI bubble's pretty close to bursting. Um, Here's a stat for you that blew my circuits this morning. Dell Computer is up 246% year to date. 246% in 6.5 months. I go, that's crazy.
That's
And I
nuts.
posted it, and then it turns out the former president of Microsoft chimed in and provided a sort of a passive defense of that. I happen to know him, and so I sort of countered with, yeah, but it's very, very dependent upon the AI story. So in some senses, Mike Green said, um, you're booking revenues as though they're sustainable, when in fact they're kind of a one-off, as like selling one of your warehouses or something and then calling that earnings. You're not gonna book those revenues again. And at some point they're going to disappear, and you're going to have a company priced for massive revenues that it has no revenues. Um,
I will say, kind of back to fucking SDI. Some of the shit they did was so insane, like Operation Plowshare,
I don't know that one.
where they were just digging moats that they needed with nuclear weapons. And it was like they're doing it in like 1/80th of the time. And they're like, this is great. And they stopped. I don't know why they stopped. But I don't know. I look at the crazy shit they're doing with those, and
Well, you got to figure Elon Musk's Boring Company must have some serious tech in it that we're not getting to see.
absolutely. Well, what Elon Musk is doing, this is what I truly believe, is Elon is building around the world right now. He's taking what are my essentials? 8 hours of sleep, meditation, workout, prayer, water, food, do the podcast. Like that's my survival. I think he is looking at them and he is trying to, I don't know. I think completely co-opt it, if that makes sense.
Well, some people think he's a front man.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't know.
I think I was gonna say, but I think something like the Boring Company. I think everything he's doing, he's setting up for a new world. Boring Company because going to ground on Mars to get away from the radiation, satellite internet, the rockets, obviously.
But
He said,
Mars could be like, you know, Kennedy saying we're going to land on the moon, where it's really about something altogether different.
What do you think happened on the moon? Do you think there's something up
Um,
there?
um, well, the first question is, did they actually
Did
go
they
to the,
go?
and I've stayed agnostic on that, which sounds appalling to some people. Like, oh, you
Now
actually.
I've changed to agnostic because I now realize I'm just like they would do it if they thought there's propaganda win. Yeah.
So my brother watched a 4 hour documentary that made the case, and he said he got to the end of it, and he said he's convinced it's a problem.
Hmm.
And there are these little things I pick up shards of, but I actually did. Oddly enough, I sent him the documentary, but didn't watch it. Um, in some sense, it's kind of one of those. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Not because I don't know what I don't know how I benefit from knowing they did or did not go.
Yeah, I would think, let's say you find out they didn't go, I think you would chalk it up as like a that was a crazy propaganda win, and
I
or
give
that was
someone
a
you have to
that
give someone credit for one of the great scams of the century.
I was gonna say, or God, they laundered a lot of money.
Well, it's certainly going to the moon was not about going to the moon. That was the sugar, the candy coating on top of
Yeah,
a defense program, right?
imagine if they faked it, they had the rocket take off and some land somewhere else.
And
That's
by
a
the way,
lot of money
we're
to
about to see
launder.
the end of the climate change grift. That's about over.
Yeah, because the AI grift is here.
Yeah, now the AI grift is here, and we don't need the climate grift's actually in the way. And so
It's just
the
hilarious.
people who have tied themselves to that wagon are
It's
going,
so fucking hilarious how you see people being like, "Dude, we need to power these with nuclear power," and it's like, what were you saying like 6 months ago?
well, but also we're gonna get told now that there is no global warming.
Yeah,
What I do believe, however, in terms of the I think these data centers, besides the economics of them being horrific, probably, um, I
give me,
think there's
give me.
health risks here. I think if you are living next to one of them, you could be getting absolutely bombarded. I think electromagnetic radiation is bad for you. I buy that model. It's not a well-educated opinion, but I remember years ago reading that cops who were using radar guns would put the power pack between their legs as they aimed the gun at the cars going by, and they all got testicular cancer.
Well,
And so that's what alerted me to the possibility that you don't necessarily want to have your house underneath power lines. Your body has a huge amount of magnetically sensitive processes in you, and when power has associated with all sorts of magnetic fields and stuff. And so I got to figure, they say that those AI centers are noisy. There's so much going on inside them that they put out this pretty seriously audible hum, and I got to figure it's rattling your brain pretty badly. So,
I'm
so
getting I'm getting a guy on the show. He actually messaged me on Twitter the other day. My message had originally, excuse me, I'm pouring water. My message had originally gone to a spam. So he got back to me. He made a post in February, and he had this great thing about talking about the like moving data centers to Mars, using the rockets to get to, or not to Mars, but using the data centers in orbit, getting the rocket to, he said, fuck Mars, getting the rocket to the moon, and then building a mass driver to launch these data centers around the moon, and they can dissipate heat in the vacuum. And he's like, that is a like 100-fold increase in efficiency.
Well, so I got into it on Twitter. I get into these silly arguments because something bugs me. And I said, how do you dissipate heat in deep space?
Well, it's
How do you
radiant, right?
Well, but radiation is tricky, right? How do you radiate? How do you radiate? So if you have to cool off a nuclear reactor, how do you do it?
Well, and I don't know how accurate it is. So I'm citing a video game, but Kerbal Space Program, if you unlock you get farther and farther ahead of the rockets, and you get like the super hot plasma drives. The whole thing is to have these huge, almost wings and they're just glowing red hot. And I don't know where it radiates to because it's not like
Oh,
it's
but
in the
what
ocean.
most people don't realize, they think space is cold. Space doesn't even have operationally, it
They
really doesn't even
they have a yeah.
and
I
so I
think
started digging into it, and finally um I got this idea. I said, and I asked Grok about the space suits that they do their walks with.
yeah.
And I said, how do they control temperature in those spacesuits? And it turns out that the biggest problem they have is actually cooling them, not keeping them from getting cold.
Hmm.
So deep space is not sucking the heat out.
Yeah, it's not a heat sink.
And it's sort of like if you're in deep space and you yelled, no one would hear you. There's nothing to propagate the wave.
Didn't they always say like, the surface of the moon when it's sunny, it's like 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and then on the dark side, it's like -90. I wonder if the regolith of the moon is that temperature. Could
Well,
you
so I
bury
think
a data center
that
in that?
temperature measurement is effectively got to be if you put a thermometer in the sand.
Well, that's what I mean is I wonder if like the moon itself is fucking cold.
Well, I think the moon itself is hot and cold in different ways, but I don't think there is heat like that above the surface, if you went 20 feet off the surface of the moon, I don't think it would
It's,
be hotter than
it's
five.
just zero. Well, I'm wondering how much of the regolith is hot or cold, and could you dissipate heat by putting data centers in the regolith?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. If we have to put data centers up on the moon, one could, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that I think they're going to solve this whole regulator problem. This is going to be like, back decades ago when they said, that computers fill
Rooms, yeah.
auditoriums, and they said someday there's going to be a computer that's no bigger than a Volkswagen.
Yeah, one day you'll have a computer the size of a fridge, and you're like, wow, the future's gonna be great.
Yeah, right. And I think that the AI is going to be solved more with software than hardware. I think the Chinese are on the right track on that.
I think that's what Alex Jones said years ago. I'll send you the clip. But the real AI that's being formed is an emergent AI, and it is through the billions of people using the internet
Right.
and our billions of neurons in our own head, and we each have like 100 billion neurons, and I think 100 trillion connections between them. And then we're all using devices, and we're, taking pictures and mapping, and we're doing real world things, and we're all throughout the cities all day, every day, billions of people in different worlds. I wonder, like global brain, I wonder if there's a flame, just like our intestines, just like our bacteria have no idea who Dave Collum is and who Tommy Carrigan is, but
Right.
they're there and they're doing their thing. I wonder if the first AI is an emergent thing or over it that would probably be better than anything we could engineer.
Well,
And that might
my son who runs the events at the Council on Foreign Relations, so I can
People email me that all the time. They're like, "You realize that Dave is a fucking CFR?" And
no, no,
I always get back to him. And I go, "Dave's Bilderberg, not CFR. Fuck you.
and yeah, that's right. And
You're
actually
above that."
no, but my son, he doesn't run the events like Pete Peterson or anything like that. He runs the events like he's in charge of making sure that the microphones work and the
Yeah,
recording
yeah, yeah.
work. But he makes sure that when he tells an interesting story. Here's an example. So the council, when they have to feed people, they're not feeding meatballs here. This is not like going to Yankee Stadium and buying a hot
No, you're at a country club
players.
clubhouse.
And so he said, for example, that at 8 o'clock in the morning, he'll call one of their major providers and say, we need lunch for 100 people. And he told me, he said one of their providers quit. They just stopped. And he said they're doing over $1 million a year business and they stopped. And I said, why would they do that? And he said they just can't do it. They couldn't keep up because he would call them at 8 o'clock and say, we need lunch for 100 people. And these are not fucking cheese cubes and crackers, right? And and he says, then I'll call them at 10:30 and say, make that 150. And he said, if they can't do that, they can't work for us. And they have events all day long in that place. There's 20,000 members of the CFR. So, there's all sorts of journalists and shit in there. I know several guys who are in there. And so it really is, he says the CFR doesn't have anywhere near the agenda that people think. He said everyone who walks in the door has an agenda. but the council itself does not. Now, I think when Alan Dulles and David Rockefeller ran it, it had big agendas.
Well, of course.
I think it's gone more neutral in recent years, is my hunch. But what was I going to say? He said that, oh fuck, I had a story. There's something. He had some information. What were we talking about? Um,
CFR,
yeah, but he told me something about what was going on.
regolith.
No, I don't know. But I asked him, what's the hot topic? He said, interestingly, things like the Palestine, Iran, Israel, U.S. problems, which I would have thought would be very biased. He said, no, it's an unbelievably open and frank discussion. He said, you hear all sides. And he describes moments like one day he met the president of Iran and Pakistan in the same morning. He got to sit down and chat with Nelson Mandela for 45 minutes. His first day on the job, he had to help Madeleine Albright, who was soiling her fucking underwear because something wasn't right. He's
Yeah.
got the right temperament for it, it turns out. He's unflappable. And so he says, yes, ma'am, let me help you with this. While she's shitting in her fucking pants, he's just solving the problem.
Jesus Christ.
And but their whole goal, and he said, I'm trying to remember what event it was, might have been the tsunami or something, but he said, you wouldn't believe what it was like watching the CFR mobilize. I think it was one of the tsunamis, the big one maybe in Indonesia. And he said within 15 minutes, the place had completely directed incredible firepower across the globe. He said Clinton was on site within 15 minutes, making phone calls all over the world. He said to watch them mobilize to deal with this immediate problem was just breathtaking. And so,
Tim Dillon said it best. Actually, his co-host Ray Kump, and he goes, "They're evil demons from hell, and they're putting on goat masks and fucking kids. But they're probably better. We're probably better off with them running the world."
right. Someone's got to. I once said that to my son, something about it. He said, someone's got to run it.
But no, it's Ray Kump. He's the co-host for Tim Dillon, and he goes, "I don't like it that they're eating babies at rituals." He's like, "What are we gonna do?" He's like, "I can barely pay my rent. I'm gonna run global shipping lanes."
Well, someone else said it very well. Said, it might have been Tim Dillon for all I know. Might have said, you don't think AOC is telling billionaires what to do you?
Yeah, yeah. He's great with that. Yeah, no, he's
And that really is true.
yeah, saying,
These ding-dongs in Congress who can't put together whole sentences because they didn't graduate from high school.
oh, Tim Dillon always points out, he's like, if these people are cast, they're
Right.
cast for a role.
Right. That are not high intellect.
No, it's
My favorite story, the Hank Guam story, right? Hank Johnson.
no.
Hank Johnson's, uh, I think, a senator, maybe a congressman from the hood, which explains how he got into power without having a brain. But he's interviewing a senator, a general, and he says, General, how many people are there on the island of Guam? And the senator says, I don't know, maybe blah blah blah. And he says, and how big is Guam? And the general says, blah blah blah. He took a guess, just guessing. And Hank says, my big concern is that there's the population growth in Guam is so high that it's going to capsize.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there going, either he is the dumbest guy on the planet,
Yeah,
or he
well,
is yanking our chain with
yeah,
the best of them. With the best of them. This is Saturday Night Live on steroids, right?
yeah. That's fucking hilarious.
He had to have known better.
Of course. I
But
don't.
but
I'm trying to. I can't. I'll never be able to find the clip. It was a clip from Rogan, and that had to have been 2015 or 2016. I remember I was at Chick-fil-A listening to it, and I think it's when he was interviewing Bernie, maybe. And Bernie was talking about like the people above him, And then like the way he said it, he was like, I've talked to the guys like above me that he kind of insinuating handlers. And he goes, they don't know who runs it. I think
Right.
it is it's so I mean it's evil because they fuck kids, but I think no one know I think the apex is something none of us can
So
imagine.
I was in a Zoom group with a former NSA analyst who I later confirmed was a huge player inside the Pentagon about radical Islam. He was an expert. And in the middle of the Zoom call, he starts talking about Hegelian philosophy, and I didn't know who he was. There were about 100 of us. And he starts talking about Hegelian philosophy, and I'm thinking, man, this old guy's gone off the rails. And then he started to make sense all of a sudden. And then someone interrupts him and says his name is Stephen Coughlin, and they said, "Are you a professor of philosophy or something?" He said, "No, I'm trained as a lawyer, but I was an NSA analyst for many years." And he starts talking about how you have to know Hegelian philosophy and understand the Middle East because they basically follow it. And and at one point in one of our meetings, I said we're talking about they
The
omnipresent
yeah.
they, and we were talking about the vaccine actually in this case. And I said Stephen, who's they? Who are we talking about here? And he said, well, I don't like to name names. This is a profound moment for me. He says, I don't like to name names because then you'll think you understand. So if I say Bill Gates created the vaccine, you'll think you understand and you'll have dinner and you know, you'll call it. And I translated that from that simple idea of don't draw a conclusion about, that you understand. Don't conclude you understand something prematurely, but also never draw a conclusion that gets you to stop thinking. So I rebel against ideas like uniparty.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's just a uniparty. And I go, you can hear implicitly right below the surface is giving up, right?
Yeah.
You're giving up
It's
trying to
it's a
understand.
big party, dude. You're
It's
not
just a big party. It's a big
a
club.
big
We're not
club
in
and
it.
you ain't in it. Yeah.
Right. And so I said, never draw a conclusion that gets you to stop thinking. And he at one point said, I think of it as this big self-assembling oligarchy. And and um and all of a sudden I had this image of a murmuration of starlings. And they form these spectacular patterns. And no starling knows what's going on. There's no starling in charge. No one organized that. And that's what it is. He said, so the oligarchy at the top, they don't all know each other. They're not sitting around a big table wearing hoods,
Yeah.
making calls. I bet I could get them on a podcast.
I think I think the lower upper class does the Illuminati Pizzagate shit. I think the guys above them look at them, look at the Pizzagate guys like frat boys. They're like, clean it the fuck
It
up,
could
dude.
be. And I don't know how broadly based the Pizzagate stuff is. I know it's more than a sample size of one. Um, I do believe that prominent people like the Clintons and Podestas and stuff are deeply up to their ass in the stuff.
Yeah, pure evil.
But I just don't know how far it goes. I was just going through my notes on Kathy O'Brien's book, which I've mentioned several times, and it's just truly appalling the things that she says she witnessed in her experience as a president, what's called a presidential level sex slave. And it turned out one of her major roles was as an encrypted messenger. So she would take messages from point A to point B, and her brains were so fried um, that when she got to point B, the person at point B knew what to say to her to sort of trigger her switch to that personality to then tell the message. So they were using the multiple personalities to bury the message and then release the message. Now, I was on a podcast just recently, and we were talking about this, and he's talking about indoctrinating them. The host was sort of not interested in, he was talking about indoctrinating them like sending them to Harvard and become a leftist. And I go, no, you're really missing what we mean by indoctrinating them. You're really, and it turns out this was on Steve Murray, And Steve and I dug into it, and we talked about how brutal it is, and how they do unimaginable things to kids and stuff like that. And I think it was Ferris, and Ferris was, I think, having trouble coping with the idea of torturing a kid
Oh,
incomprehensibly.
torturing to death. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it happens. I just uh, you, you don't know where fact and fiction, where that dotted line is. That's the problem. And even like someone like Kathy, I think is really trying to tell the truth, I think, but she might not really know the truth because she's only got her brain to work with.
I think you really need to read Wrath of the Wendigo.
And speaking of Twitter bingo, she showed up in my Twitter feed one day and I go, that was really interesting. So I have a whole gaggle of human trafficking Twitter followers now. That I'm in the cool kids club on that one. And as you know, um and, and it's informative, but again, I had long chats with Nick Bryant. He says if what they tell you is wrong, it doesn't mean anything. Their memories suck badly. Their memories are terrible. They're not lying to you. They're trying to unscramble their brains from this years of trauma.
Jeez.
And and um and I remember I tried to ask Kathy Engel in a Zoom call about how she sorted out her memories from and separated fact from fiction because they're hard. Even a normal person who's had a normal life has trouble putting together, was that really a memory or am I remembering a memory? And has it been distorted? And and she got defensive pretty quickly, not because she's trying to hide the fact she was lying, but rather because she's probably spent a lifetime having people calling bullshit on her. And the one thing you don't want to do to a trauma victim of this brainwashing is to deny them their belief, right? It's kind of a Me Too thing. And I've been reading so much. I gotta write about it this year. I've got to put pen to page. I've been collecting notes for 3 years now. I've somehow got to create a document, kind of to get the monkey off my back.
I think you do. Um, I say we wrap it for now because I have to
Yep.
jump on another show.
Oh,
Um,
you're going to be a basket case, dude.
why?
Because you already look like there's some wear and tear there. What's the next one?
Luongo, Vince Lanci, and Matt Dines.
Oh, then you can just let them talk. That'll
Yeah,
work.
yeah. No, no, I'm tired. I've just this is my fifth show today.
Yeah. I was seeing wear and tear there.
Yeah, no,
Luongo will
I'm
run that.
powering through, but it's
Luongo
yeah,
will run that show. So
yeah, no, yeah, it's that. That's why I put that one at the end.
right. No,
It's
no.
Autopilot.
That's why I like the three ways. By the way, is because you
You
can
can
step back and let the
just put
other.
it on autopilot. Those are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just chime in and yell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, wait till you have something to say, right?
Yeah, people always like the one who talks too much. I'm like, hey, that's his job, and the rest of us sit
I know,
back.
I
He's
know.
driving the bus.
Yeah, I
I don't
know.
want to drive the bus. I'm sitting in the I'm sitting. I don't want to drive the RV. I'm on the
He's
couch
the
in the back.
conductor.
Yeah,
He's the conductor,
and he's having a blast. Let it go. And every
right?
once in a while, we'll pop in, and
Right.
you
Just
know,
listen, filter it
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. People are fucking retarded. That's the conclusion. Um, well, we kind of talked about SDI, Breakaway Civilization, and satanic pedophiles. So I'd say it's a win.
Right. So I'm going to go back to my Death Star and go back to my home planet now and
Yes.
leave you Earthlings to work through the details here.
And thank you. I had a thought, and I actually here's the sticky note I wrote down. I want to talk. I want to ask you about it. Just the all the like the OPSEC guys I talked to, the NSA guys and stuff. They always the thing is always don't ever plug in a USB that you found. Just
Oh yeah. That's how they used to
that's
send
how they
word.
got that. That's how they got Natanz and then Stuxnet. Just it doesn't matter. Even if it's in your office, even if it's next to your computer, don't do it.
Someone could have left it there.
Don't do it. And I just had this thought. Was the Roswell craft in 1947 Should we have not touched that?
Potentially.
Should we have not touched
To
that?
give you an idea how they used to try to find ways to get those USBs into the computers. And I read somewhere they said they realized they were being way too particular. What they would do is they would just drive through past the parking lot at the
And
Rand
just,
Group
and just
or
throw them,
whatever,
yeah.
and they would throw a handful into the parking lot, and
Yeah.
some percentage would be picked up and shoved into a computer, and then the worm would be heading off into the
Yeah.
Rand computers.
They were trying, yeah, they were trying to do all this stealthy shit. And I was like, no, dude, just scatter them.
Yeah, just throw them into the parking lot.
Fucking yeah. Somebody's like, what is this?
Oh yeah,
I
freebie,
just,
all right.
I just had that thought. I wrote it down on a note. I was like, should we have not have plugged in the U of A?
You know the three body problem?
No.
Okay, so here you'll like this one. There's a sci-fi trilogy, and I've not read it, but I watched the first part of it, and so I didn't get the whole story, but it's called The Three Body Problem, and it's where an alien world reached out to us back in the 40s, and China picked it up and basically said, "Don't answer this. If you do, you'll regret it. You'll pay dearly." And the person answered. And then what happens is you go to the president, and all of a sudden scientists start going crazy and shit. And at one point, one of them gets a message that says the universe is going to wink at you at 12:03 tonight. And they go outside and they're going, "What the fuck are they talking about?" And all of a sudden, all the stars start blinking. They all start blinking. It's really well done. It apparently costs like 136 million to make the first of the three trilogies. But the first one is entertaining enough, even though you don't finish. Even though it doesn't get to the end, it's worth watching. It's called The Three Body Problem.
Last thing, I always think about this, and freshman in high
By the way,
school.
the missing scientist story this year is interesting.
Yeah, that too.
That is
Um,
weird.
but I was thinking about my freshman year of high school. We were at my buddy Alex's house, me and all my fucking retard friends, and this is before we couldn't get girls or alcohol, so we're just shooting bottle rockets and shit. And like I think we accidentally lit like a bag of them, and they went all over this like nice suburban neighborhood and like caused these little fires. And we ran out and we were like patting them down. It was like 2 a.m. We're freaking the fuck out. And we came back and then we hid in the garage. We lowered the garage all the way down just so we could look out. When we waited for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then a squad car came and just went by. I think he saw us and he's probably like these fucking kids. And he just drives around. We had put out all the fires. And he just goes away. And it was clearly he was letting us know, like, hey, retards, like I'm not
No.
gonna but stop. And I always just think of that. An event with explosions, and then time passed and a higher authority came. And I just always think about July 16th, 1945, in Alamogordo, New Mexico, we detonated the Trinity bomb. 111 miles away, 2 years later, the Roswell thing crashed. And in terms of the entire world, and in terms of the entire duration of the world, the explosion went off, and within 2 years, a 4 billion-year-old planet, within 2 years, and where did it land in China? No, it landed 111 miles, essentially on it. Were they just coming to us going, hey, hey,
Well, you know,
cut the shit?
This Bustamante guy went out on some chat board a couple years ago and said, "Okay, I'll answer any question you want." Now he's this ex-CIA guy who doesn't look anything ex about him, right? He
Yeah,
looks.
no, he's just, yeah, yeah.
And for 2 days, he answered questions. And I read every one of them, and they were hysterical. And I'm going, look, the guy's probably throwing serious bullshit, but this is fun stuff. Now, one place someone asked about Area 51, and his answer was phenomenal. He said, "It is to distract you from Area 50 and 52."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then he says, "And I'm not joking."
yeah. Yeah, there's no way it's 51 anymore. They're probably up in fucking Antarctica or some shit.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why Independence Day was so funny.
yeah. We got to wrap this because I gotta go get some food before my next show and before I fucking pass out.
All right.
Um,
Have fun.
Dave, as always, dude, appreciate your time, man.
Adios.
All right, brother, take it easy. Guys, thank you for watching.